All right, let's dive into something that's, well, let's be honest, not the most thrilling part of construction, but man, is it important. We're talking retention today.
Yeah, you got it. Retention, it's that thing, that financial safety net that everyone kind of knows is important but might not fully grasp.
And that's what we're here for. We're going to break it down, what it is, how it works, what trips people up,
Yeah.
so you can avoid those messy situations before they even start.
We're talking real-world stuff here, not just theory, whether you're dealing with a JCT, NEC, even FIDIC contract.
Exactly. Those are some big names in the world of construction contracts. But no matter what contract you're looking at, understanding the ins and outs of retention is absolutely crucial.
It really is. Because at its core, you see, retention is all about managing risk. Big projects, lots of money, tons of moving parts, timelines. Retention helps keep things in check. Make sure the client isn't left high and dry with half-finished work.
It's like, what's that saying? Trust but verify. You wouldn't shell out a huge payment without some guarantee that job's going to get done right.
Exactly. Accountability. That's the
Yeah,
key here. Think of it this way, right? You hire a landscaper, want your whole garden redone. You wouldn't pay them everything up front before they even put the last plant in the ground, would you?
definitely not. I want to see those flowers blooming first. So retention, make sure everyone's incentivized to see it through to the very end.
Right on. Now, how much are we talking about here? Well, it varies, of course, but usually you're looking at something between 3% and 5% of the total contract value.
Okay, so a decent chunk of change. It's got to be enough to matter, but not cripple the contractor's cash flow.
Yeah, finding that balance is key. And that's where things like a retention cap come into play.
Retention gap. Fill me in.
It's a limit. Basically, even on those massive projects where that 5% adds up to a huge number, there's a ceiling on how much can be held back at any given time.
So it prevents things from getting too one-sided, even on the big budget projects. Makes sense. Now, this retention money, it's not like it's all released at once when the project's done, right?
You got it. It's usually done in stages, a chunk on completion, and then the rest after the defects liability period.
So like a grace period to make sure everything gets buttoned up before that final payment.
You got it. That's the idea.
But then what about those mega projects? Like imagine building a whole new wing of a hospital. That's not finished all in one go.
And that, my friend, is where sectional completion comes into play. Different phases, different sections get finished and handed over at different times.
Like a well-choreographed dance, but with construction crews instead of dancers.
Exactly.
Instead of one big reveal at the end, it's more like a series of smaller milestones. Makes sense, especially with something as complex as a hospital.
You got it. And how those sectional completions are handled, how that retention money gets released, well, that can differ, see, depending on the contract you're working with.
Which brings us to those specific contracts. JCT contracts, those are super common in the UK, right? What's unique about how they approach retention?
Yeah, the JCT, the Joint Contracts Tribunal, their contracts, they're all about, well, fairness, I'd say. One of the big things that stands out is this emphasis on trustee status when it comes to that retention money.
Trustee status. Okay, break that down for me. What does that actually mean in practice?
So let's say, hypothetically, you're a contractor, right? And you're in the middle of building a big warehouse JCT contract, and suddenly, bam, the client goes bankrupt.
Uh-oh. That's the stuff of nightmares. What happens to that retention money in that situation? It's just gone.
Well, that's where this trustee status comes in. See, with a JCT contract, ideally, that money's held in trust for you, the contractor. It's not just absorbed into the client's assets, for creditors to pick apart.
So it's like a safety net. Even if the worst happens, you're not totally left out to dry.
Exactly. Provide some peace of mind.
I can imagine. Are all JCT contracts the same? Or are there different flavors to choose from?
Oh, there's definitely a few to pick from. You got your standard building contract, your minor works, intermediate. Each one's kind of geared towards a different scale of project, different levels of complexity.
So you're not just checking a box, you're finding the right tool for the job. You mentioned something earlier, too, about retention bonds with JCT contracts. What's the deal with those?
Yes. So instead of the usual way of doing things, right, where the client directly deducts the retention money from your payments, a JCT contract, it often allows for this thing called a retention bond, see?
And a retention bond is?
It's like an insurance policy, basically, but for that retention money. A third party, usually a bank or maybe an insurance company, they provide a guarantee.
Okay, so they're saying, we got you covered.
Exactly. That money will be there. see if it's needed. If there are defects to fix, or, well, if the contractor doesn't hold up their end of the bargain.
So it protects the client, but it also helps the contractor avoid having a huge chunk of their payment just tied up.
Right. Cash flow is king. Got to keep things moving.
Especially in construction. Projects can take a long time.
Tell me about it. Now, moving beyond the UK, let's hop over to, let's see, the NEC, ECC, the Engineering and Construction Contract.
This one rings a bell. It's all about flexibility, right?
Yeah.
Collaboration, that kind of thing.
You got it. And one of the ways it promotes that is, well, with the option for what they call a retention-free amount.
Retention-free, so
Yeah.
no retention at all.
Not quite. Basically, there's a certain amount, an initial sum, that the contractor gets paid, right? No retention deductions taken out of that.
Yeah.
Helps with their cash flow early on in the project.
Oh, so it's like a little boost right out of the gate.
Hmm.
Helps them cover those initial expenses. Smart.
Right. And another cool thing about NEC contracts is how they handle subcontractors. They use what's called gross payments.
Gross payments. Sounds kind of, I don't know, clinical.
Well, the idea is to avoid this thing called double dipping on retention, which can get messy.
Double dipping. Okay, now I'm intrigued.
So picture this, right? You've got the main contractor. They've already had retention taken out of their payment from the client.
Okay, makes sense.
Now, they hire a subcontractor for a specific part of the job, right? Well, without this gross payment thing, that subcontractor, they might get hit with another round of retention deductions from the main contractor.
Wait, so they're getting double deducted? That doesn't seem fair.
Exactly. And that's what gross payments, as encouraged by the NEC, aim to prevent. It makes sure the subcontractor is only dealing with one layer of retention, usually taken out by the client at the very top.
Keeps things clean, stops people from getting taken advantage of. Now, we've talked a lot about the UK, but let's go global for a minute. FIDIC contracts, those are the heavy hitters for those massive international projects, right?
You got it. Big projects, big money, big complexity. And FEDC, they don't just stop at retention, they add another layer of security, something called performance security.
Performance security. Okay, so we're talking, what, like a security detail for the whole project. Bodyguards for the construction site.
Well, not quite bodyguards, but you get the idea. It's about protecting the client if the entire project goes sideways, not just little hiccups here and there.
So if retention is making sure the details are right, performance security is like making sure the whole building doesn't fall down.
That's a good way to put it. And much like those JCT and NEC contracts, FIDI, it offers different versions, you see, to fit different projects. You've got the red book, usually for when the client, they're the ones providing the design, and then the orange book, which is more common when the contractor, they're taking the lead on the design side.
So once again, it's not one size fits all. You got to pick the right tool for the job, understand the nuances.
Absolutely. And that's why, see, it's so important to actually, read the contract. Don't just skim those sections on retention, performance security. Really get in there, understand the detail.
Yeah, don't just let your lawyer handle it. Make sure you know what you're signing. Now, even with a solid contract, I imagine things can still go wrong. Are there, like, common traps people fall into when it comes to retention?
Oh, for sure. Even with the best intentions, you can hit bumps in the road. One of the big ones, I'd say, is delays in getting that retention money release. Seems simple, right? Project's done, defect liability period, it's over, pay up. But you'd be surprised how often things get slowed down. People change roles, paperwork goes missing.
Communication breakdowns, the worst.
Exactly. And that's why, you see, keeping good records from day one is so crucial. Every email, every inspection report, everything documented.
Stay organized, stay on top of it.
You got it. Another common one, no surprise here, is disputes over defects. What the client considers a major flaw, the contractor might see as, well, a minor imperfection.
It's all subjective, right?
Yeah.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder,
Yeah.
or in this case, the quality of the grout work.
And those disagreements, they can cause huge delays, eat into that retention money with legal fees, the whole 9 yards.
So how do you prevent those disagreements from spiraling out of control?
Honestly, clear communication from the get-go. Define what a defect actually means within the contract, right there in black and white. And then regular inspections, address issues quickly, don't let things fester.
Be proactive, not reactive. Now, we've talked a lot about protecting both sides, the client and the contractor. But what happens when, let's say, the client, they hit some hard times, go bankrupt even?
That, my friend, gets complicated. Even with those safeguards in place, like that trustee status with JCT contracts, client insolvency, that throws a real wrench in the works.
So what's the best line of defense for a contractor in that situation?
Do your homework. Before you even sign anything, really dig into the client's finances. Look at their history, their credit, all of it. Those retention bonds we talked about, those can offer some extra peace of mind.
Always better to be safe than sorry,
No,
especially with these big projects.
100%.
Well, this has been, I gotta say, a crash course in retention. Really eye-opening.
It's one of those things, not the most exciting topic, but absolutely essential.
Essential and often misunderstood, I'd say.
Oh, sure.
So, to everyone listening, do your research, ask questions, read those contracts carefully, and hey, don't be afraid to get expert advice if you need it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up our deep dive on retention. Thanks for joining us.